that is now called to order. Has anyone signed up for public comment for our Parks Department meeting? Okay.
I have.
Okay, we are ready for a reading of the consent agenda, please.
Minutes from the SMPD meeting of September 25th, 2017.
Are you
Yes, I move that we approve the Metropolitan Parks District consent agenda.
I will second that. If there's no further discussion, I will call for the question. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. There is no business agenda tonight, but I am expecting, oh, there she is. Our Financial Services Director will give us a 2018 Shelton Metropolitan Parks District budget introduction. Thank you, Nola.
Thank you, Commissioners. And some of this we'll be covering when I do the overall city budget, but incorporated into your budget packet for the main city budget presentation is a budget summary page for the Shelton Municipal Park District Fund. It's on page 16 of 17 in your budget packet that I gave you. And that outlines 2016 actuals for the fund. It also outlines 2017 budgeted amounts for the fund, as well as year-to-date 2017 actuals through June of this year. As I get into the budget presentation for the city, a lot of this detail will be wrapped into that. So I won't necessarily go into a lot of detail with that yet, other than understanding that that's part of our budgeting process overall. And if there's any particular questions I can answer for you at this time, I'd be happy to do that.
Not for me.
Okay, I have no questions at this time either. It looks like we're right on track.
Okay.
So thank you so much. Okay, there will be a special Shelton Metropolitan Parks District meeting on Monday, October 16th at 6 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Moore. Now, I would at this time like to open our regularly scheduled City of Shelton Commission meeting for October 2nd, 2017. Would you please stand with me and recite the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As I'm sure everybody knows, but if you don't, there was a huge tragedy in Las Vegas. I believe it was yesterday, might have been this morning. 59 people got killed, the largest massacre in American history, 500 people injured. And so I think for something like this, we have lowered our flag to half-mast because of this. If we please just take a moment of silence, and then we'll return to our meeting, please. Thank you very much. Okay, first thing on our agenda is for us to have our weekly commission reports, and so I'll turn the meeting over to Commissioner Moore at this time to talk about her activities.
Okay, I was pleased to attend a public hearing today on regarding extending the hours of the Cold and Hungry shelter over at Community Lifeline. That got over just in time to come to this meeting. Tomorrow I have a Housing Coalition Executive Board meeting. We are still working on the strategic plan for the Housing Coalition. On Wednesday, I have a Mason Transit Authority budget workshop, And that is it for this week.
Thank you very much. Tomorrow, I will be having my weekly staff briefing to set our agenda. On Wednesday, I plan to attend a special hotel motel tax board meeting, and that is all of the scheduled activities that I have this week. At this point, we have a general public comment period. If anybody from the public would like to come and speak, this is an opportunity, and so just have to fill out a card, give it to Jamie, and we would have those comments. Is anybody scheduled to speak tonight?
Yes, we have Lisa Renfro.
Okay. Oh, there's Lisa. Okay, you want to come and talk for 3 minutes?
Sure, thank you. You were talking about the fees, like paying half, maybe before or not until the job is complete for your permits.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking, what if, like in 6 months, if they completed the job before 6 months and you could collect property tax revenue, you would only charge them a certain amount as an incentive for a discount versus if they didn't complete it until after the year where you weren't able to collect for property tax on some type of fee-based structure. So you don't have to refund the money versus, just as you, depending on if they know how long the project's going to take them.
In this room, there are no bad comments or no bad ideas. We'll take that and we'll put that into the minutia. And we thank you for coming and sharing what's on your mind. Anybody else signed up tonight?
Yes, we have Marilyn Vogler.
Okay.
Marilyn Vogler, 420 East Poplar. Good evening, Commissioners. Well, I asked a couple of weeks ago for someone to introduce a resolution or an ordinance about salaries, whatever it takes. And I haven't seen one, so I'm going to ask again. People will be voting in November on whether to change to a 7-person, more modestly paid council rather than have a 3-person, generously paid commission. And I'd like to propose that whether we make that shift or not, the people of Shelton simply cannot afford you all as you are paid right now. I would like to suggest that you look at our comparable cities, and I think that's possibly Chehalis and Centralia and maybe Port Townsend, and see what the elected city officials there are paid and introduce a resolution for something similar. We have, at this point, and this is not a criticism, but what I believe is a statement of fact, a well-paid city manager, a well-paid financial officer, a well-paid public works director, well-paid planning director. We do not need full-time commissioners to run the city. And since with 3 of you, you can't talk to one another outside of your public meetings anyway, it's kind of impractical. I know you've spoken about the things you do to support the city. You've lobbied, you've traveled, you've attended meetings. I think this is nothing beyond what could be expected of any of the elected city officials across the state of Washington. And so I'd like you to consider that, as I said, we simply cannot afford the current commissioners' salaries and benefits that we're paying. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else? Thank you very much. All right, moving on to our consent agenda. Are we ready for a reading of the consent agenda?
Yes.
Could we please have that?
Vouchers numbered 15550 through 15643 in the amount of $274,224.87. Approval of minutes for business meeting of September 5th, 2017, study session of September 11th, 2017, special meeting of September 18th, 2017, study session of September 25th, 2017.
All right, you have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as read.
Okay, and I second that motion. There's a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The agenda passes. We have a couple of items on our action agenda for tonight, and the very first is going to be about a contractual amendment, and it's going to be presented to us by our Public Works Director, Craig Gregory.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioner. As we discussed last week, we'd like to move forward with a full design of the Downtown Connector project, which is Alder Street and Olympic Highway North from C Street to C Street, from First Street to C Street on Alder in the amount of $310,000 to be completed in mid-February. So if you have any additional questions, I certainly can answer those for you.
I don't have any questions, but I think just for the public's sake and whatnot, if we could kind of review, just review why you did a great job presenting it, I think, at our last meeting, about the way that grants work, the way you tie projects together, the way that you explain why this is, because there are some people, that, again, and I was quite one of them over many of the years, to say, enough spending, no more spending. We're going to do it just the way it goes. And but I think it's the right thing to do, and I've already said that. But maybe you could explain one more time exactly why it's beneficial for us to take this opportunity at this time.
So just the highlights of the general grant application. If not funded in 2017, scoring for that grant would drastically increase to have a 100% design and be ready to go to bid in the 2018 season. So if not funded this year, the odds of getting funded in 2018 would drastically go up. If we do get funded in 2017, tying the two projects together, Basin 3 and this Downtown Connector project, would be an economy of scale. So basically bringing on, instead of somewhere in the neighborhood of a $5 or $6 million project with Basin 3, to bring forward a $10 million project would certainly lower bids and give us the ability to get a much better price to move forward with that sometime to go to bid in early March and tie those two projects together. Instead of having multiple contractors in working at one time, you would have one contractor working on one large project to complete.
And that's why I think it's a good idea to do that. Do you have any questions?
No, I'm very much in favor of doing this. I guess, I do have one question.
Sure.
Do we have to adopt the Complete Streets ordinance before we apply for the bids?
We do not have to do that through this grant process. The Complete Streets is a different, not a grant, but an award.
Uh-huh.
So we will continue to work on that.
Okay.
We possibly will have it complete by the time we go to bid on this project. So sometime in early 2018, we should be completing that and applying for that award. But
Okay.
it's not tied to the TIB grant.
Good, I just don't want to miss out on any dollars.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I
You're
have
welcome.
no more questions.
So what are you requesting of us for tonight?
We are requesting a motion tonight to accept this amendment.
First, what I would like to do is make sure that if there's anybody from the public that wants to speak about this specific issue, they could speak at this time. This is an action agenda item, and so if there's anybody that would like to talk about that, you could come forward and speak now. If not, then we've already said our comments, I believe. So I believe that a motion, I would accept a motion to approve this contract.
I move to allow Gray and Osborne Incorporated to proceed with the design of Alder Street and Olympic Highway North from First Street to C Street by amending their current contract and authorize the city manager to sign the contract.
Okay? And I second that motion. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. Thank you very much. The second item is one, again, that we have kind of already kind of okayed and whatnot, but I think this is just the next step in making it final. And so this is going to be something our attorney, Kristen French, is going to talk to us about.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioner. You are familiar with this item. It is an informed consent document that would authorize me in my capacity as city attorney for the city to also provide legal representation for the Shelton Metropolitan Park District. And as I've explained previously, it's a requirement that that informed consent be in writing. And we've discussed the details, and I'm here if there are any additional questions.
I have no further questions.
I have none. So, I would request, well, we have to also ask if anyone from the public would like to speak about this specific item, please come forward. And seeing no one coming forward at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I move to accept the informed consent of the City of Shelton and the Shelton Metropolitan Park District for joint legal representation and authorize the mayor to sign.
Okay, and I second that motion. Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. Thank you very much. And now, if there's any administration reports, we're going to turn this all over to Noel, I believe. But before you come forward, if we could, just under the term of administration reports, we rarely, with comments from the public, do we respond. We meditate upon what they're talking about. But I think I want to address this salary issue. And so what I want to do is first say, from my position, I'm only speaking for myself, but the Journal has made this quite a big thing through their editorial process, and there are some people that think that we are overpaid. And so what I want to do is first make sure that we all understand the facts. And I don't have any prepared statement, really wasn't planning to talk about this, but I think that the citizens deserve to hear from the mayor exactly how I feel about it. So, number one is the salary for the city commission was set, I believe, 17 years ago by Mayor Scott Hilburn. And he did it at a time believing that if you want quality people to step up and lead this city, that you needed, that was a fair pay at that time. That was 17 years ago. So when I ran for office many years ago, salary was never something that I really knew about. I didn't think about it. I ran because I wanted to serve the people of the city of Shelton. And one of the things I wrote in my campaign flyers was that I chose, if I elected, because I chose to give 10% of my income back to the city, 10% of my salary, and I did that faithfully for 4 years. What I did is, and I'm only speaking for myself, I'm not speaking for other commissioners, what I did is I took this job seriously, and I put full-time hours into a part-time job. And I will still continue to do that. I've attended over 1,000 meetings or events that were over 1,000 city-sponsored events. And I charged the city of Shelton for 700 of those. As commissioners for the city commission, we get $70 for a meeting. And I believe the Port and the Mason County commissioners, I believe, get 125 or 140, approximately double what we get. I have committed myself passionately to bring grant money back into the city. I have spent days on the road in my car driving to Eastern Washington and many, many hours sitting down with legislators over at the Capitol and department heads negotiating grant money to come back to this city. And I did it because I wanted to do it. I did it because I love the city. I did it because I had a passion to see us break the addiction of low-interest loans. And we succeeded. I formed a coalition called the Sewer Funding Coalition, which we've talked about before, which was the punch in getting the department heads and our legislators and even the governor himself to recognize the financial burdens that small cities go through in trying to replace extremely expensive infrastructure. And I did every one of those meetings, every one of those mileage on my car for the Sewer Funding Coalition at no charge to the city. I did not charge the city anything for those. And the millions, not thousands, some news agency, it wasn't the Journal, but some news agency said, and the mayor said he brought thousands of dollars back to the city of Shelton. Well, come on. Multi-millions of dollars, and we're still in that process. And there's still more millions. There's more multi-millions that I'm engaged in negotiating to bring back to the city. Again, you can get somebody to do something for just about anything, but if the city really wants quality people to step up and negotiate and do the job and bring multi-millions of dollars back in grants, if you really want that, you're going to have to pay them something. So the $25,000 a year is, I believe, below minimum wage, if not very close to it. And I feel that it is an okay wage. I don't have a problem with it. And as I said, the first 4 years I gave 10% back just because I wanted to make sure the citizens understood that my heart was to give them a bang for their buck. And I think I've done that. I think I've fulfilled my part in that. And so I know, speaking for the other two commissioners that sit on this commission, they put themselves out there. They go to tons of meetings. And so we did not ask for this wage. This is something happened 17 years ago. And so at this point, especially during a politically charged environment, I would just say that I've done the best job I could, and I think that the wage is fine for what I'm doing. And I will continue to put myself out there 100% for the city, but that is my statement concerning how much we all get paid, which we all didn't vote ourselves in that money. So I hope this hasn't bored anybody, but it is where my heart is, and I love Shelton, and I want to continue to do what I can to make it, to go the extra mile to get all of our infrastructures paid for so that the people in this city, when that happens, we don't have to increase their sewer rates anymore. Okay? That's my goal, and I'm getting close to getting that accomplished. So thank you for hearing me. I snuck that into an administration report, and if you would like to speak, you're more than welcome to.
I would. That was actually the subject was actually on my list of things to talk about. So I appreciate your comments. It has been really interesting with the comparison that came out, and I also talked to our former mayor about that, about how that came into being. And back at that time, he told me that exactly what you said, as far as they thought it was a way to attract more qualified people to, I don't know what the pay was before that, but I know it was a lot less. And so their idea at the time was to bring the Shelton Commission salary into line with other commissions. There were a number of other cities that still had commissions at that time, and they also looked at the port commissions and the county commissions, and came up with a number that they felt was in line with that. And I will say I was really surprised when I found out that we were the fourth highest. I knew that, and that's not exactly comparing apples to apples, but I knew that it was unusual to get paid the same amount that we did, because many of the council members that I had talked to from around the state were more along $400 a month with, some benefits, but not always. So it was kind of surprising to me. And the reason that I initially had asked the question is that it came up to me frequently as we are talking about the citizen initiative that will be on the ballot. People are saying, well, what happens with the salaries there? So I do think it's something that we may potentially have to address at some time. I will say that it's below minimum wage, definitely. I think, many times I'm sure that we all work at least a 40-hour week. So I don't know that for what we do, we're especially overpaid for the duties that we do, but we did sign up for it, and I believe that it is a public service. And so I'm willing to look at it, especially as we move forward, so that possibly during the budget process we can see what it would look like if indeed we do go to a 7-member council. So I guess that is my point.
All right, good conversation. And I think that completes that for tonight. I think we're ready for you, Nola. Nola is our financial services director, right?
That's what they tell me. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner. Before I get into going through any of the details of the budget proposal or the initial draft of where we are so far with our budget development, Megan Croson was kind enough to come with me to the meeting tonight, and she has hard copies of what I'm going to be going through. So if anyone in the audience would like a hard copy, just wave your hand and Megan can give you a copy of that document.
This is not a final copy. This is
Oh,
a-
no.
Yes, yes.
We're just getting started. So what I'd like to do is just give you a basic introduction to the budgeting model. That might be different than anything you've seen in the past. I haven't looked at what you might have been presented with in years past, so I don't really have that as my point of reference. I come at it with a fresh, different perspective. But really what we're going to focus on tonight would be taking a look at the budget timelines, the budget priorities, budget considerations, and the fund summaries for last year and the first half of this year. But before I do that, before I really get into the details of this document, I wanted to just review, for the benefit of the commissioners and for the audience, the budgeting process roles that we discussed at the retreat in August, the budgeting retreat. And what we had discussed in August was that there are really 5 key stakeholders in the budgeting process. The first would be the elected officials. They provide policy guidance at the beginning of the process. They confirm the budget meets direction by adopting that budget, and they monitor for conformity and results. The second stakeholder is the city manager. The city manager proposes policy for elected officials' approval at the beginning of the process.
Excuse
and
me, one
develops-
second. No, what you're talking about is not written anywhere in here.
That is correct.
Okay.
I'm just giving you a
I'm
review.
looking for the page. I'm going,
Yeah,
where's she
yeah.
at there?
I'm not into that document yet.
No problem. You're
I'm
just
giving
giving
you a
an
review of-
introduction. Okay,
Right,
thank
just
you.
giving you a review from August. And the second stakeholder is the city manager, who proposes policy for elected officials' approval at the beginning of the process and develops broad strategies for implementing the policy. The third stakeholders are the department directors. The department directors develop operational strategies for delivering the budgeted services, and they are accountable for day-to-day services. The fourth stakeholders are the supervisors and the frontline service providers, and they are the rubber meets the road or boots on the ground, or however you want to say that. Those are the frontline service delivery people. And the fifth, and definitely not the last or least important, is our public. Those are our stakeholders who observe the results, they receive the services, and they provide feedback to the policymakers about the services they're being provided. So just as a refresher, that's some of the roles that we discussed at the budget retreat in August. So with that, let's see if I can, there we go, thank you, Tim. I will get into this. Before I get into this, I will just stop to say, do you have any questions so far? No. Nope, so far so good. Okay. So first I want to talk about, let's see if I can, there we go. Now, what you see on the screen is small, but you have a hard copy to refer to. What we're looking at here are the budget timelines, and that is on page 2. And please note, at the bottom of every single page of this document, it says draft. These are not final documents, so we'll still be doing little bits of cleanup and checking numbers, et cetera, on these. If you look at page 2, the annual budget development timeline, we are currently sitting at item number 6 on that list. So the commission is currently getting an introduction to the budget model and baseline budget assumptions and timelines. At this point, we are on track to be able to deliver a good budget to you by November. We'll actually be bringing you back a budget, let's see here, the last week of October, 4th week of October, item number 10, we'll actually be bringing you a first look at the full budget. And that will also include, at that meeting, we'll also do the first public budget hearing. So this is just a reference point of where we are in the process for timelines. There we go. Based on the budget retreat that we held in August, if you go to page 3, based on the budget retreat that was held in August, these are the highest level, kind of 10,000-foot view budget priorities that you identified as most important for 2018. Now, underneath these are some details, but these are the high-level critical priorities that the commissioners identified at the August budget retreat. And if you go to page 4, this one I want to take a little bit more time with this because it's pretty important. When you're looking at building a budget, you have to take into consideration a number of factors that we don't necessarily have total control over. Some of them we do, some of them we influence, but we don't entirely control, and some of them we have no control at all over. And there are items that affect our revenue as well as our expenditures. And I just want to go through this list with you so you understand, as we're building the budget, we look closely at all of these items. On the revenue side, we take a close look at the aggregate assessed valuation for property that's within the city limits. And we look at any changes for calculating property taxes. We look at new construction activity. We consider revenue forecasts for sales and B&O taxes. We take into consideration any contractual activity that might involve revenue to the city, particularly if anything has changed. We'll be looking very closely for anything that's different. We'll take a close look at any relevant grant or loan activity that might be coming up or that's newly in place. We'll also take a look at any other possible things that could be impacting our revenue, and it can be a long list of all sorts of things that can affect city revenue. And we're really going to keep our eyes and ears open for anything that might be affecting our revenue as a whole. When you look at the expenditure side of the budget, we're going to be looking at potential wage adjustments, and that could come in many forms. That could be COLAs, that could be step raises that people routinely get, that could be promotions, it could be a lot of different things. We take a look at our L&I rates. L&I rates are pretty high, and it's a big budget item, so we have to pay close attention to that. 3?
No, I was waving, I should have just done like this. I wasn't kidding. Do you want us to just inject, we have a thought, are we to inject in some of these things now? Is that okay?
You can inject anytime you like.
Okay, well, let's just do it that way, I guess, because I'm here. Now, I did read that the L&I rates are forecast to go down. Was it 2% or 5% or something?
For some classifications they are, but for others they're going up.
Okay, so just, I read that, and so
Yeah.
I don't know how much relevant it is. And we are probably involved with at least AWC's, this used to be a real big thing. It was called a rebate program, a retro program. Is the city involved with any program like that? It's a contractual agreement with the Department of L&I to where if we have less accidents, you will then pay back some of our dues. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with an AWC program that involves L&I.
Okay. Maybe Vicki Look would
Rebates.
know if we have, do we have a retro program?
I know that L&I has a return to work program. I'm sorry, Vicki, go ahead.
I would just saying, because if we aren't, I don't know that this climate is the best for that, but 20 years ago, there was literally millions of dollars involved in that, and that those rebates could be big. And what I would say is we might want to take a peek at that. There are several rebate retro programs with L&I out in the state, and unless they've all dissolved because they don't do that anymore. But it'd be something to think about as far as, less money we would pay to the
You
organization.
might be thinking about the return to work program.
Nope.
Okay.
It's an L&I rebate program, a retro program. So,
We can
anyway,
certainly look into that.
we can certainly talk about that another time.
Yeah,
Okay?
writing a note. We'll also look at potential benefit cost adjustments for our benefit programs. We'll look at any personnel leave cash outs. If we have employees leaving the organization, there's always a cash out for those that have leave on the books. We have to take that into consideration when we're budgeting. We review our financial policies regarding cash reserves. We look at our current labor agreements to see if there's anything in those labor agreements that we need to pay particular attention to as we're building our budget. We look at staffing configurations and any potential changes that maybe have been made this year, mid-year, in staffing configurations to make sure we've captured that correctly in the next year's budget. We also look at interlocal contractual activity where we might be on the spending side rather than the receiving side. If we're receiving services somewhere that we have to pay for, we'll look at that to see if there have been any changes or any new contracts that are in place. We look at any major capital expenditures that are on the near horizon. We take into consideration our debt structure and our debt service requirements. And we look at any other expenditure impacting factors, and that could be any number of things. So before I go into the last piece, any questions on that? Anything else? No? Okay. Now that tiny print on the screen you probably won't be able to read, but you can see it on your hard copy there. What I have here for you as a starting point in the budgeting process is a high-level summary of each of the funds that the city has. We operate on fund accounting. That first one is your general fund, and it simply shows you 3 critical pieces of information. It shows you your actuals for 2016. It shows you 2017 budgeted, and it shows you where we're at so far with half of the year expended as of the end of June in 2017. When you look from the top down to the bottom, at the top it shows what the total beginning cash was in that fund. Then you have a summary of the revenue categories, total revenue, and then below that you'll see total resources. That's your beginning cash plus all of the current year's revenue. And then below that you have a section by department of all of your expenditures. You'll see total expenditures. Below that, you'll see a calculated ending balance. When you take your total expenditures and your ending balance, that's going to match your total resources up above. So I'm going to stop right there for questions.
Well, you might just, let's just, I'm sorry, if you have questions.
I don't
just
have
jump
any
right in,
questions.
and I'll jump in. It's easier when they got 2 people sitting here, because then we don't have another person to jump right in. But looking at your total revenue there, under 2016 and then the 2017, I see that it, I guess it's not that much difference. Okay. All right, I'm kind of answering the question myself. I noticed that we had 10, it looks like 10,859,000, and this in 2017 we had 11,45, which is that's only a couple $100,000 looks like. And then it kind of changed a little bit when it talks about the total there. And so, do you see that change, or then it's 13,003? I guess no, is that about the same? I was just curious.
Keep in mind the 2017 budgeted column
Yes.
was built 1 year ago.
Oh,
I didn't come up with those numbers.
oh, these numbers.
Not the
Okay.
2017 budgeted column.
Ah, okay.
Those are what was budgeted last year.
Oh, okay, I understand what you're saying, yes. Okay, my mind was unfortunately thinking about a 2018 budget, which is
Right.
what we're really talking about.
And
2018 is not on here.
not yet, that is correct.
That's where my I'm sorry, I was wondering.
That's okay.
Very good.
That's
Okay,
all right.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, you can tell by looking at this, for example, when you look at the general fund revenue, the 2016 current year revenue was $10,859,534. If you hop over to the far right column and you look at that 2017 year-to-date actual with half of the year expired, you'll see that our current year's revenue is at roughly 5.3 million. So you could project or assume that that revenue is probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 10.6 or 10.7 million at the end of the year. That's a guess. So you can see how to kind of read through the document. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
What got me off of 2018 is not written on this paper.
That's
So
correct.
My mind was going, well, here's last year and this year, but.
That's correct.
Okay, gotcha.
When you see this document again in about 3 weeks, you will have another column on the far right, and that will be the 2018 proposed. And I'm working with the leadership team right now to do some really accurate as we possibly can, projections for what 2017 numbers are going to be and what the 2018 numbers need to be based on where we are with our projecteds and based on the priorities that you've identified at the budget retreat in August. So in 3 weeks, when we come back, you'll see something looks very similar to this. You'll just have one more column on the right that has 2018 proposed. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. As you go through that, the rest of the document, it's simply the same format for the tourism fund, the bond debt payment fund, that's the 201, that's on page 7. You have your capital improvements fund, you have a water fund, you have sewer fund, solid waste, storm drainage. There's a payroll benefits fund, and that's really a fund that just has money coming in and going out as it gets processed through payroll, so don't get excited about that one. You have the equipment maintenance and rental fund. You have the fireman's pension fund. You have the Shelton Metropolitan Parks District Fund. I think I need to correct municipal to metropolitan. You have the library endowment fund, and that's the one with the $100,000 that you can't spend, but you can do things with the interest. So that is what I have for you thus far. Again, I emphasize the word draft on all those documents. We are still verifying totals, although they're looking very good right now as far as being very accurate. I can just answer questions at this point if you have any.
Well, now I understand, I just picked this up at 4:30. This is really just a history.
That is
This
correct.
talking about what we've done these past 2 years, current year and 2018. 2018 is not anywhere in here. So
That is correct.
We're not talking, we're just using this as a reference point.
This is the preliminary that's going to bring us to bringing you 2018 actual numbers.
So we're not going to be a 3-hour meeting tonight, are we?
Nope.
Good.
So, when we go through this, I see in some cases it looks like our revenues are a bit ahead of half of as much as projected. So, when we go through, does the balance always just carry over to the next year in the different funds?
Two questions that you just asked. Let me answer the first one, and that is, if the year in this example is halfway done, is it a reasonable assumption that you multiply that number times 2 and that's what it's going to be at the end of the year? And the answer is no, that's not a reasonable assumption, because revenue can be seasonal. So some expenditures and some revenues might only come in once a year.
Okay.
So it can really skew that number. So that's an excellent question, and the answer is no, don't assume that with half the year done, you multiply that number times 2 and that's going to be the end, because that isn't always the
Okay.
case. And then your second question, tell me your second question again, Tracy. I was so focused on the first question.
Oh, okay. My second question was, what we have left at the end of the year, does that just transfer over to the following year as the beginning fund balance? Or
Okay.
are there differences in
That's-
the different accounts?
That's actually another excellent question, and it's exactly the same in all of the funds. And here's how it works, and this is particularly relevant when you talk about a cash basis entity, which we are now. If you look at page 5, when you're looking at that general fund summary, and you go down to the bottom of 2016 actual, you'll see an ending balance there
Yes.
of 2,923,558. See that? That is the total ending fund balance of the general fund in 2016. Now, that total dollar value includes our restricted cash, our unrestricted cash, committed cash, reserved. It includes everything
Okay.
at the summary level. Notice if you look at the far right-hand column and go all the way to the very top, you'll see that
Oh,
number
there it is.
appears as the beginning cash in that 2017 year-to-date actual. You see that? So that is an accurate assumption, that the total ending cash in a fund at the end of a given year is going to be the beginning cash in that fund at the beginning of the next year. Keep in mind that when you look at this and it says total cash, it does not reflect how that money is split out as far as what's restricted, what's not restricted, what can we spend, what can we not spend. Right now, for summary purposes, it's just total cash in the bank.
Okay.
Would be the way I could explain it. It's total cash in the bank in the fund. And that's true for all of these funds.
Okay. Perfect answer.
That help?
Now I understand. Yeah, thank you.
It's just like your home checkbook. When you think about it in cash basis and you look at this, it's exactly the same as your home checkbook.
Okay.
Whatever you had on December 31st at midnight, that's what you're going to have 12:01 a.m. on January
Okay.
1st.
Great. Thank
That
you.
help?
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your report.
Good.
All right, I'll turn this over to our city manager at this time for any comments.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioner. Just 3 features or upcoming features. We mentioned last week that we're going to get you a fee schedule, current fee schedule, which we did. It's also available to the public on our website. We'll bring that forward next week to discuss ideas that you may have that you want us to look at for updating. We certainly have the permit fee, the building side to do, so we'll bring that forward next week to review during your briefing meeting. I also want to let you know that the strategic plan team that's been working for the last few months is nearing completion of the first step of its work. So we'll also bring forward next week mission, vision, values, and a couple of goals that we'll look at, get approval on before we move to the next stage, which would be department directors working on their work plans to achieve those goals. And then the final thing is that we're pretty close to being ready for a public presentation of the water and sewer rate model update that you approved us to move forward with about a month or so ago. And we're trying to figure out a method to make that the most public forum possible. So
Great.
more to come, but we should have an answer by the time we meet next Monday.
Great. I'm sorry. I had a question for you as well, and this goes back to the comments that we made regarding the salaries. I am a little bit confused about if the measure passes in November, is there a committee that will meet to determine what the fair salary would be for 7 members, or how does that work?
It'll be part of a larger conversation that the 3 of you would need to take part in over the last couple months of the year to prepare. So I think you'll likely set up a number of committees to take a look at that. The salary portion of that conversation is probably different than the others because that's the one that can be decided at any point. And if a decision was made now or later to adjust salaries, that's something that is likely separate from that conversation overall.
And I was under the impression as well that the commission could not set their own salary.
I haven't looked into this exclusively, but when we asked our former city attorney what this looks like when we're looking at a resolution, she indicated that commissioners can, and council members in other cities cannot change their current salary. They can change the overall salary, which would be triggered by somebody else coming into office or a term being over. And then she indicated, I think the mayor mentioned earlier, that if a commissioner wished to give back part of their salary, that's something they can do on their own.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, our next meeting will be October 9th at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. This meeting is adjourned.